Hello and welcome, wonderful people. Today we're going to talk about the JavaScript framework Hotwire, HTML over the wire. Firstly, I wanted to thank the EJS and the YEGRB for hosting this BBQ. I realize that we're all still in COVID lockdown here, and that means every day is a barbecue, if you want it to be. But many props to, I have written down Ian here. He didn't show up tonight, but so we're not going to give any thanks to Ian, but many props to the organizers, Andy and Kelsey and everyone else. So just very quickly about me. My name is Matt Riemer, as only you privileged people truly know. I'm a prolific slacker and an online not-so-funny guy. Along with my two business partners, I founded a company called Code and Effect, and we have a SaaS app called Today. So I am one of these lucky people that discovered coding when he was a kid and kind of just never stopped. These days, I get my best dopamine hits out of building tools that help me build better tools and just really embracing the whole like continuous improvement kind of mentality. As a developer grows, or at least as I have, they build their own set of libraries and tools, and they really invest in their own stack, which is why it's exciting when a new tool comes out that totally shakes things up. I think the JavaScript framework Hotwire is one of those tools. Or at least it's an implementation in line with the next paradigm of building web applications. This is the future, my friends. So Hotwire is an alternative approach to building modern web applications without using much JavaScript by just sending HTML instead of JSON or JavaScript over the wire. My awesome state diagram here. Server should send HTML to browser. That's really just the best way to do it. So instead of using approaches like AJAX, where we do asynchronous requests and fetch pieces of JavaScript, pop them into our DOM, or the modern day approach of like building a front-end app and a back-end app, they talk to each other through JSON. There's separate logic all over the place. With Hotwire, we basically just flatten all that complexity. We go back to just simple server-side development. Server renders HTML, sends it through WebSockets these days, through browser. So Hotwire is the JavaScript framework that uses a clever bag of tricks to update everything inline and on time. Once it's set up, Hotwire makes it so you don't really need to write much JavaScript at all. So is this really the next paradigm? I think it is. Let's do a quick history lesson here. In the beginning, in like the very 1990s, we're just starting out on the internets here. We started with no data at all. We just sent finished HTML from the server to the browser. You got your links and your blinks and your marquees. That's it. And then there was JavaScript. It could make the HTML dynamic by instructing the browser to change the page. So we could show and hide things, change the text. It's fantastic. We also had like a different way of no HTML at all, sending XML and XSLT for the browser to transform itself. But we don't really talk about that. And we're certainly not going to talk about like Java apps or Flash apps or anything like that. But the next huge level up really came with AJAX. So the technique of using JavaScript to asynchronously talk to the server, request a piece of XML or HTML, get it back, and then insert it into the DOM as an append or an insert or replace. Apparently this guy named Jesse James Garrett, JJG, apparently he invented the term AJAX. But this was very powerful, and it basically changed the game. Obviously, jQuery gets a special shout out just for being jQuery. Love it. So this was all fine and well until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. And then all of a sudden, Ajax wasn't cool anymore. XML is too verbose, they said. It's too unreadable. It's too restrictive, too flexible. So the ecosystem moved on to JSON instead of XML. This shift meant that everything needed to be rewritten. Years have been spent writing JS framework after JS framework, leveling up all those tools, the build systems, the static typing, and ultimately transforming JavaScript into a first-class language. So that brings us to today. The current state of the art paradigm is to have kind of two apps, a backend that serves JSON and maybe persists all your stuff to a database and such, and a front end that consumes it and renders all the things. This beautiful cacophony of complexity and contortionistic Rube Goldberg machinery is commonly referred to as the single-page app. So, obviously, when it's done right, a single-page app is awesome. It's super close to native. It feels responsive. It can be glorious. But there's a lot of trade-offs with it. There's a lot of complexity. You're juggling multiple code bases, the whole authentication and authorization. Logic is on your server and your client. You're like doubling up on this stuff. There's issues with slow time to first paint, SEO stuff, URLs, and the JS ecosystem, basically. So Hotwire basically remedies all the cons that we just discussed with front end and back end coordination. It lets us build the majestic monolith once again. It replaces all this intense complexity of JavaScript with more JavaScript, but you don't have to write it. So, what the heck's Hotwire? Like the best things in life, the title Hotwire is a play on itself. HTML, over the wire. See what they did there? Okay. So Hotwire brings together a few different existing JavaScript libraries in a marriage of convention over configuration and Ruby on Rails philosophical goodness. And like many good marriages, it has three participants: Turbo, Stimulus, and Strata. So the first of them, the heart of Hotwire, is Turbo, formerly known as Turbo Links. Turbo is a set of complementary techniques for speeding up page changes and form submissions, dividing complex pages into components, and stream partial page updates over WebSocket, all without writing any JavaScript at all. It's designed from the start to integrate perfectly with native kind of hybrid apps for iOS and Android. And I've explored these a little bit, and they're just kind of like a light wrapper, the minimal amount of iOS or Android frame that ties into the TurboLinks language and basically just makes you do web requests out to your server, and it all looks close enough to native. As long as you have a good connection, nobody notices. So Turbo does three things. The first thing it does is Turbo Links. It makes all your page navigation just feel fast. When you click a link, instead of making a full page refresh, Turbo will make a regular server request for the whole page, and then basically copy and paste the response's body tag over the current page's body tag. It leaves the HTML head in place, and that makes it so the browser doesn't need to reevaluate any JavaScript or CSS. You don't get the normal kind of like loading progress bar or the feedback from a browser, and it makes things feel really fast. It also does a bunch of kind of front-end caching and really reduces the perceived time that links take. The second thing that Turbo does is turbo frames. So instead of navigating a whole page, we replace a part of the page on the HTML, the current page, with a subsequent requested one. So some of the older developers here will remember HTML frames. This is the same kind of idea, except it's done with modern day JavaScript-y components and like tags and stuff. But you just declare a turbo frame element, and it feels just like HTML frames used to. They're a separate little area that you can click and navigate into. They also degrade nicely with your browser. So if you don't have an up-to-date browser, it'll fall back and work pretty well. And you don't get any of the cross-origin or like linking issues that traditional HTML frames could have. So this bottom code snippet is just the kind of Ruby on Rails code, I guess. This is ERB. And being that this is a Ruby and Rails kind of like sister JavaScript kind of thing, there are some helpers for it. So you can make a frame very quickly and just render it, or you can do a lazy loaded one that'll display a spinner until it loads the content of this endpoint. It's kind of cool. So then the third thing that Turbo does is Turbo Streams. This handles the entire WebSocket connection layer, and it works with the turbo frames to replace portions of your page where appropriate. It really cleanly lets you render HTML on the back end and push that content to the browser. So this is like the minimal example, and again, it's kind of like in the Rails world. But you would create a turbo frame for this stock object, and then just display its ticker and the price. On your show for the stock method, you do the turbo stream from, which it just as a one-liner subscribes you to like the correct room and endpoint and sets up the server and the browser WebSocket connection. And then we just render the stock. And then back in the active record world, in your database, if your stock changes for any reason from like a web update or like a background task or like the database, there's a one-liner to broadcast that. And through this amazing Hotwire system here, everything will just update, and you'll get basically real-time stock updates. So that is Turbo. The second component of Hotwire is Stimulus. Stimulus is a little bit older, but actually a very underrated JavaScript framework. It's really powerful. Turbo will do kind of all this in place, partial rendering and page updating without much JavaScript, but every once in a while, you want to throw in your own little kind of like custom code, and Stimulus basically gives you the framework to do this. So Stimulus is its own whole JavaScript framework. It kind of reminds me of Backbone.js. It doesn't seek to take over your entire front end. In fact, it's not concerned with rendering HTML at all. That lives on the back end where it should be. Instead, it's designed to augment your HTML with just enough behavior to make it shine. It's cool because it operates purely by observing. So you kind of end up writing JavaScript that doesn't have all these like onload and async code and all that good stuff. So just very quickly, we have a div here that's a data controller hello, which means that the accompanying JavaScript class hello controller will be controlling it. We have the hello target of name and the targets of output, and which basically just give you a really succinct way of referencing the element without having to do like selectors and all that kind of selector spaghetti. And then we have a button with a data action that when you click it calls the hello controller and the greet action. So this just kind of knows about the output target, and we're going to set the text content to hello, the value of the name target. Cool. So all the turbo code is built on top of Stimulus here. And the last participant of the Hotwire three-way trifecta is strata. Strata standardizes the way that the web and native parts of a mobile hybrid application talk to each other via HTML bridge attributes. I don't know what a bridge attribute is. This makes it easy to progressively level up web interactions with native replacements. So honestly, no one really knows too much about Strata yet. It's not up on GitHub. There's no real public information on it. But it's Basecamp's, the creator of Ruby on Rails, library for native integration of Hotwire, in case you want to make an iPhone or an Android app. And I think it's still a work in progress. So I have a quick kind of code demo, more of a code tour here, honestly. Give me just a moment here. Hope this is going well. I have some inception. Right.
I think we did lose the feed for Matt. I'm going to double check on him in just a second here.
Hey.
There he is. Okay, you're back.
Sorry, yeah, my bad. Is it going well here? I'm just going to jump into like a 2-minute code demo, and then I have a few more slides.
Perfect. I will leave you to it.
Cool. Okay. Apologize for the technical issue. Sure. Okay, so I have a little kind of just chat app thing going on here. And to accomplish this, it's surprisingly few lines of code. When I was building our SaaS app to Dumb in the last maybe 2 years ago up to a year ago, we did like a whole real-time app. It's like presence and Google little Docs style real-time stuff. And it took a lot of code to write that. And Hotwire, basically, you just get all of that for free. So to install it in a Rails app, you just kind of do the gem Hotwire Rails. But all this is really doing is doing JavaScript for you. You can use this with any language, not just Rails, but Rails is the best. So why would you want to use it with anything else? This is my package JSON. You can see I'm on version 7.000 beta 5. Seems legit. But so all I had to basically do was, once I have my dependencies set up, I do a little bundle and a yarn install. I throw these turbo include and stimulus include tags in my application layout. And then I created a room. So a room just has a name and many messages. And I have a message. It belongs to a room, and it has a rich text area body. So this is the built-in Rails 6 action text that does like rich text cleanly for you. And the only other fancy thing going on here is that after I create, I'm going to use this helper to broadcast my change to the room ID. So in my room, I have a show. So I just have a card bootstrap. Bootstrap is awesome. The turbo stream from. So this one-liner sets up a stream and connects my browser to the server over this room channel. And then I have one of those little turbo frames, which lets me just render all the messages. And that's about it. It's a message there. So to show you the thing here. got the turbo cable stream source channel, I guess. And it's kind of cool because the stream name is like automatically encrypted. So back in my code, that stream name was this like room, room 1. And here it's encrypted, so it doesn't like leak any attributes or whatever, which I'm totally doing with my messages as I just render the IDs there. But yeah, it's a pretty sweet chat app, and it's very quick to get set up. So just back to the last slide or two here, my friends. So yeah, in conclusion, Hotwire is a JavaScript framework that builds on Turbo, Stimulus, and Strata, and ultimately Ruby on Rails. It makes server-side apps feel like single-page apps, vastly simplifying their implementation and reducing the amount of code that needs to be written. I actually truly feel like this approach is like the new paradigm in web development. It keeps many of the advantages of server-side development, and with these techniques of in-page partial updates and just WebSocket originating events, there's no polling or anything. You can gracefully degrade. We gain all the benefits and ultimately the feel of a single-page app as well. So my homework for each of you is throw away all your tools, delete all your existing JavaScript. It's all trash now. Join the next paradigm and rewrite everything with Ruby on Rails and Hotwire. Thank you.
Right on. Thanks, Matt. Well, I'm going to leave a little bit of time here for questions. If anyone, oh, he's gone. He's disappeared.
It's my
No, he's come back.
Browser not working with Riemer so well.
Gotcha. Okay, so I mean, I've got some questions from myself, but maybe in the meantime, other people will have some to add in the chat. So I love the idea of writing less code. I love the idea of not having that necessary separation between the logic of the backend and front end. What's the catch?
What is the catch? Like, honestly, there really isn't one. If you wanted to do an offline first application that's like doing all like local storage and stuff, I think it might make more sense to approach that from like a purely JavaScript kind of way. But no one actually needs to write that. If you want to use like cameras and like geospatial sensors and like be a native app, I don't know. I don't even think you can really use JavaScript for that either. Like, will React Native handle that? Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I think mostly, yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
We do have a question from Mark. Would you call Hotwire production ready?
No, not really yet. I think it needs like a month or two to incubate. I'm a strong proponent of never using like a 6.0 or a 7.0, and Hotwire is 7.0 beta 5.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think that it needs a little bit yet, but there's a lot of tools that exist out there. There's a popular Rails gem called like Cable Ready that basically does like the same thing where it's broadcasting over WebSockets, and it even uses that slick morph DOM JavaScript library, which basically makes it so you're doing like the minimal number of DOM operations to achieve your transformation.
Okay.
And Hotwire could get there too.
Cool. Question from Derek that I actually had myself. Is there anything live that we can check out that uses Hotwire that's actually on it right now?
Great question. Thank you. So check out hotwire.dev, which is their kind of information site for it. But the answer is basically they're using it on Hey, their new Gmail competitor, I guess. maybe some of the devs would be using it outside of that, but I'm not sure.
Cool. Yeah. Hey, I believe you have to pay for, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious about it myself and kind of tempted, honestly, but yeah, I would like to see something that is a little bit more open for everybody to take a look and actually see what the advantages are. Like I saw what you were able to do there that seemed like you were able to do a lot for very little. And normally that kind of interaction would actually take quite a lot of work.
Yeah, like I alluded to there, like when I was writing my SaaS app to Dumb, I literally took 1,200 lines of code to just like do all this Ajax, put it in the right place, morph stuff, do around forms correct, and it's just like, yeah, it's a lot of code to do it, and it's cool that it's being supported by Basecamp, and hopefully it'll be like an official Rails project, and they'll put it under that umbrella.
Cool. Do you see any major barriers between like kind of where it is right now and where it needs to be to actually be like a mass adoption product?
Yeah, all the good developers that grew up doing server-side development, just writing HTML on the server and using all those excellent tool chains and builds and stuff. Most of them have just gone on to like middle management jobs. They're project managers and all this kind of stuff now. And then like the new generation of people have just grown up on the front end JavaScript world and stuff. So I think it would take some of those old school devs coming back and just being like, hey, remember when this was cool? It still is.
Sure. Any questions yourself there, Andy?
No. I thank you, Matt, for the presentation. It was very good. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to step off and let you two do the outros.
Cheers.